Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. My name is Teresa Daly, and I'm the Associate Director over at the Office of Student Financial Services at Hofstra University. This evening, I'm going to be giving you a preview as well as some tips of the upcoming 24-25 FAFSA filing process. This is an informational webinar, so this will be recorded and it will be posted to our website where we do have all of our recordings. So you'll be able to find that shortly after the presentation. It'll be on our homepage, hofstra.edu/SFS. As most of you know, the FAFSA did a launch in December 31st. So the application is live. We do recommend you don't have to rush to file. We would recommend that by the end of January you have it completed. But we do know that there have been some waiting rooms when completing the FAFSA, which is completely fine. It's just because they are monitoring everybody going in. But what I'm going to be going over today is a preview of what to expect for the application when you go to file, so that way you are prepared and it looks familiar. So let's get started. So some important notes. To get prepared, if you haven't done so already, you are able to make an FSA ID, which is the login that your student would use ahead of time. So the FSA ID is needed for the student, and a separate FSA ID is needed for the parent. This can be made on studentaid.gov. So again, an FSA ID is needed for the student and one is also needed for the parent. It can take a few days to verify. Once verified, you're then able to go ahead and complete that application. As I mentioned, the FSA ID can also be created for the parent as well. If parents file taxes married but separate, both would need an FSA ID. If it's married filing jointly, only one parent needs an FSA ID. Another change that has been made to this FAFSA application is the data exchange tool is now mandatory. If it is not used, your student will not be eligible for need-based aid. Need-based aid would be the subsidized loan or federal grant programs. They would only be eligible for the unsubsidized loan if you do not use their data exchange tool, and I'll get into that in our upcoming slides. So I have here a really helpful tool for planning. It's going to assist with estimating your SAI or Student Aid Index. You can go to hofstra.edu/SAI estimate. Or you can take a picture of the QR code on the screen. I'll leave it up for a moment, where you can actually get an estimate of what your student aid index or SAI will look like, which is how federal aid is determined. So I'm going to leave it up for just a moment before we move on. So some FAFSA tips before we get started. Should you hire a consultant to help you file the FAFSA? We do not recommend paying a fee when you're able to get the help you need right from the source for free. Specialized FAFSA representatives are available to assist you step by step through the application process. You're able to call them at the number on the screen, 1-800-4FED-AID, or they do have a live help button to chat with a FAFSA representative right when you're completing the application. They also have a wizard, which can answer any questions. It has a little question mark that you can hover over, and it will tell you exactly what it's looking for. But if you do need any clarification through what the FAFSA is asking for, we strongly encourage that you contact Student Aid directly so you can get the help you need right from a specialized representative. Some FAFSA tips. So what are some common mistakes that students and families may make when completing the FAFSA? The first is not asking for help. Again, we recommend calling them directly, utilizing their online chat or their self-service buttons or wizards throughout the FAFSA to get the information you need. The next would be filing the correct FAFSA for the correct aid year. At this time, there are two aid year applications available. There is the current academic year, which is the 23-24 academic year, and there is the next year, which is the 2024-2025. If your student is a high school senior and will be entering their freshman year of college in the fall of 2024, you want to make sure you're completing the 2024-2025 FAFSA application. Make sure you're not using any nicknames. Use the name as spelled on the Social Security card. Make sure you're using correct Social Security numbers and dates of birth. Do not list any parent information under the student section or vice versa. And make sure both student and parent signatures go through, which I'll show you on another slide. And very important, if your address has changed and you've already submitted an admissions application, please make sure that your address on your FAFSA and admissions applications match. So once you submit your FAFSA, please contact your admissions counselors at any of the institutions you've applied to make sure that your addresses match on both the FAFSA as well as your admissions application. So as I mentioned, the FSA ID is the first step to completing the application. We recommend that if you haven't done so, that you create the FSA ID as soon as possible, as it can take 3 to 5 business days to verify this information. And again, the student would need one as well as the parent. If you as the parent already have another child in college, you do not need to create separate FSA IDs for yourself. You can use the same one that you've used, but each student needs their own individual FSA ID. They do have a new multi-factor verification once you create your FSA ID, which is very important. Most things do have that multi-factor verification nowadays where they send you a text with a code. This backup code that they will send you will only be sent once, so make sure that you do save it in a safe place so that way you have it for future uses. So why should you file the FAFSA? It is a free application. It determines eligibility for federal grants, loans, and federal work study. Some states, including New York, require it as the first part of an application process for financial aid from that state. And some colleges and private organizations do require it for consideration of additional scholarships and grants. So what are you going to need to file the FAFSA? So you'll be able to collect the sources of 2022 taxed and untaxed income. The FAFSA is based off of prior years. Now that the data exchange tool is mandatory, you wouldn't need too much of it. You can just have it on the side just in case. But something you will need is any asset information, which includes most recent bank statements, investments, bonds, mutual funds, etc. Social security numbers, students' driver's licenses, if they're applicable, as well as any alien registration numbers. But again, it is based off of the 2020 income information, and the data exchange tool will give your information, will link your information right from the IRS directly to your FAFSA application. So who should you contact when you're working on the FAFSA application? While completing the FAFSA, if you have any questions, we strongly recommend that you contact Federal Student Aid by phone or through their live chat. They're able to assist with any specific questions regarding the application. Once the FAFSA is completed and a federal aid package is generated, you can then contact the school regarding any questions you may have regarding the package. So starting the FAFSA. So once your FSA IDs for both you and your student are verified and you're ready to start, you would go to studentaid.gov and you'll see file your FAFSA. So here I'm going to walk you through kind of the process as logging in as the student. So I would click on student here. You can also click on parent, but this specific walkthrough, we're starting as the student. So the student is going to be asked once they log into their FAFSA about adding a contributor. So a contributor for dependent students would be a parent. So that would be who is considered a contributor. The contributor will get an invite sent to their FSA ID to complete their portion of the FAFSA once the student has completed theirs. So the student will indicate who their contributors are, provide their information, and once they finish their part, parents, you will be able to get your part through an emailed linked invitation. So contributor consent is important. So every contributor, which would most likely in most cases be parents, every contributor must provide consent and approval for students to be eligible for federal aid programs. Consent and approval will allow the automatic process of the data exchange tool, which links your IRS information directly to the FAFSA. Again, this is now required for any students to receive any federal aid eligibility in terms of grants or subsidized loans. If it is declined, students will not be eligible for federal grant programs. After the contributor section has been completed, we will then move on to the student information. So this is going to be the first section of the FAFSA when the student logs in, asking for their personal information, name, date of birth, social security number, address, email, and phone, as well as their state of residence. And you'll see I have little screenshots throughout the presentation directly through a demo of filing the FAFSA itself. So that way, when you do log in and do it yourself, you'll see screens that look familiar. Again, students will also need to provide their consent and approval, as some students do have taxes that they have filed. So their consent and approval is needed to retrieve and disclose any federal tax information. This is for the 2022 year. Everyone must provide consent and approval, even if you did not file a US tax return or any tax return at all. They need your consent and approval in order to be eligible for federal student aid, including grants and loans. Providing consent and approval also reduces the time it takes to fill out the financial section of the FAFSA. By electronically importing your tax information, you ensure your application has the most up-to-date data. A frequently asked question: if you're married and didn't file a joint return with your current spouse, does your spouse have to provide consent and approval for you to access their tax information? The answer is yes. The spouse will also need to provide consent and approval. What happens after you provide consent and approval? The transfer of your tax information will begin, and that will remain in place. And again, if it is declined, you would manually provide your income information and will not be eligible for federal student aid, as it prevents FAFSA from requesting your federal tax information. That is only used for the purpose of the FAFSA form. After the students complete their section, as well as consent and approval, they will then go into the section of personal circumstances. This will be questions that help FAFSA determine their eligibility for federal student aid and can affect the types of aid that students are eligible to receive. So it will ask the student's marital status, single, never married, married, remarried, separated, divorced, or widowed. Again, this is for the student section. So for instance, if the student indicates single and presses continue, it will then ask for the student's college and career plans. So if your student will be a freshman in the fall of 2024, when the student begins the 24-25 school year, their college grade level will be first year freshman. When the student begins the 24-25 school year, will they have their first bachelor's degree? The answer will be no, as they have not yet achieved it. That is actually a common mistake. A lot of people do say yes, as they misread the question and think, are they pursuing their first bachelor's degree? This is asking if they have their first bachelor's degree. So the answer would be no. Then it will go into more personal circumstances where the students would select any that apply. For instance, if the student is a veteran of U.S. Armed Forces, if they're on active duty, if they were an orphan or not living with any biological or adoptive parents, if they were a ward of the court, foster care, emancipated, has any legal guardianship, or they can choose none that apply. If they choose none apply, they will then move on to the next part in personal circumstances. It will ask at any time after July 1st, was the student unaccompanied youth, either homeless or self-supporting? And you would either indicate yes or no to continue. Then it will also go into unusual circumstances. So this information will help them to evaluate the student's ability to pay for school. So it'll say, do unusual circumstances prevent students from contacting their parents, or would contacting their parents pose a risk to the student? Unusual circumstances may include being left home due to an abusive or threatening environment, abandoned or estranged from parents, refugee status, unable to locate or contact. So if any students have gone through any of these, they might indicate yes. If they do indicate yes, they may need to provide additional information to the school. If they indicate no, they are most likely a dependent student. So for this purpose, we're going to say no. So then it will say whether you're an independent or dependent student. So if a student indicates any unusual circumstances, they may be considered independent. So again, the unusual circumstances on the previous slide, so I'll just go back for just a moment. Like I said, not able to contact their parents, or refugee status, abandoned or estranged from their parents. If they indicate yes to any of those, they may be considered independent. So if they are independent, to complete the remainder of the application, they would need to contact the schools that they're applying to provide additional documentation. This may take a little bit, as it depends on when the school receive your FAFSA. But if you do have any unusual circumstances, we do recommend that you contact the schools that you are applying to, so that way they can let you know of next steps. So if a student is deemed a dependent, this is anybody that is under 24 years of age, you would need to provide your parent information on the FAFSA unless there are those extenuating circumstances. If parents are unwilling to provide this information and the student does not have any unusual circumstances, then they will only be eligible for the direct unsubsidized loan. You would not be eligible to receive any additional federal grant programs, federal work study, or the subsidized loan. So if they select yes to apply for a direct unsubsidized loan only, this means that the parents are unwilling to provide their information and they do not have an unusual circumstance. Or they can press no, which means you're eligible for possible additional aid depending on your FAFSA information. So after that section, it's going to tell you about the student's parents. So the student would indicate if these parents are married, yes or no. And on the FAFSA, just so everybody knows, a parent is the student's legal, biological, or adoptive parent. So I have a few different screenshots here. So if parents are married, and they are married to each other, yes. If they're married to each other and they press no, but the parents live together, you would need to provide information for both parents. So what's pretty great is through this sort of process, depending on what you click on, the FAFSA is going to give you sort of like a wizard, which is the blue box, which tells you exactly what information you're going to need. So I do have another situation, I think, here. So for inviting the parents, if it's both parents that are needed, so if both parents need an FSA ID, it's going to then ask the student to provide the information for their parent. So each parent would need their own information, first, last name, date of birth, social security number, as well as email address. And this is how the contributor gets their invitation to the FAFSA. So if parents are remarried, if this is a circumstance that you are currently in. Did one parent provide more financial support than the other parent over the past 12 months? So if both parents provided an equal amount of financial support, or if they don't support the student financially, select no and refer to the parent with greater income and assets in the next question. Has the parent you identified in the previous question remarried? If the answer is yes, and again, this is if they have equal contributions to the student, you would use the parent that has the greater income and assets when it comes to filing the FAFSA. So if the parent is remarried, we would need FAFSA would need the information for both the parent and the step parent. So the next page would be the same slide that we saw here, where you would need to provide the parent's information with the remarried parent's information as well. So their spouse, so that way you can get the information for both parents to be contributors. And then if there's just one parent, so if parents are not married, parents do not live together, and one parent provides more financial support and is not remarried, you would only need the information for the one parent. So you would only need the information for the parent that provides more financial support. Then it's going to ask the student's demographics. So these answers will not affect the student's eligibility for aid or use in any calculations. This is just for research purposes for the FAFSA. You can decline to answer, prefer not to answer, but it will ask this in the demographics question. It will also ask the student's citizenship status, as well as the parent's educational status, whether parents have attended college, neither, one or both, or you're not sure. Then after the demographics section, it's going to go into high school completion. So the student will need to indicate their high school completion, which is either if they're getting a high school diploma, GED, or homeschooled. If you are getting a high school diploma, it's going to ask for your high school's information that the student graduated from or is going to graduate from. Then it's going to go into the finances for the student. So student finances. Students will need to input the below information based on the 2022 year. Please note they cannot be left blank. It will not allow you to continue if any sections are left blank. They'll pop up as red. So if there is no value, please make sure that you enter a 0. So the questions that do need to be inputted, even for the student, as not all students may have these, but you would have to indicate 0, would be an IRA rollover, pension rollover into an IRA, amount of college grants, scholarships, or AmeriCorps benefit that's reported to the IRS as income, or foreign earned income exclusions. So again, this may not apply to the students. It is a section on the FAFSA. They would just have to indicate all 0s. Then it's going to ask student assets. So it's going to ask the total of cash, savings, checkings, anything that's in the student's name. It will ask anything in the student's name like investment net worth, like real estate. Again, it's not the home that the student lives in, or any current net worth of businesses or investment farms. If it is 0s, you would indicate 0s. And it is looking for the information as of today when it is taking into account the assets. After that, we're going into the selecting colleges. So this is where the students can indicate the schools that they're looking to apply to. What's a great change this year? It used to only allow you to add up to 10 schools at a time, but now the FAFSA has expanded to 20 colleges at a time, which is great. So you'd be able to enter either the school by name, or there are certain school codes that you can enter, and students can enter up to 20 schools at a time. If they do need to send it to more, they would complete the FAFSA in its entirety along with the parent section, and then go in and change the schools. After the school section, It's the signing and completion stage. So it's very important that student signatures as well as parent signatures go through, but right now we're just on the students portion. So by signing the application electronically with the student's FSA ID, they're certifying that they will use any federal or student financial aid to pay for the cost of attendance, that they are letting that their information is accurate in the completed form, and that you understand that you are using these funds for educational purposes. So students would click on the box that says that they agreed to the terms and then sign. Once signed, they're going to get this screen here saying they're almost there. So if a student is a dependent, that's where it'll say parent contributors. It'll list the parent contributors below and say that they've sent them the invitation. So the FAFSA form will not be complete until the parent or parents fill out their contributor section of the form and sign it. Once completed, it will be able to submit for processing. So now that the students portion is completed, parents, you will get an email. And in that email, you'll get something like this, a contributor invitation. So it's going to say your student wants help on their FAFSA form, and they've identified you as a parent on their free application for federal student aid. Parents are required to provide their financial and demographic information on the FAFSA form. It does not make you as a parent financially responsible for the educational costs or any federal student loans they decide to accept. It's just needed in order for them to qualify for any federal grant programs. So if you accept the invitation, you're agreeing to share your personal information and contact information from studentaid.gov to your FAFSA form. And once you accept, you'll be linked right to the application. So as we mentioned, every contributor would need to provide consent and approval for the student to be eligible for federal student aid. With your consent and approval, we can obtain your federal tax information and automatically from the IRS to help you complete your section of the FAFSA form. You can save the form and return it if you do need more time later. So it's not a one step and then, you have to complete it all in one shot. You can actually come back to it. So it's going to ask, once you've accepted your invitation, parent information. So this is where you'll confirm general information like your date of birth, address, and phone number. This would already be inputted because the student sent you the contributor information, which has some of this information. Then parents will be asked to approve consent of sharing their 2022 tax information through the data exchange. Again, if consent is not given, students will only be eligible for the direct unsubsidized loan. After parent information, it's going to ask for parent demographics, which will include marital status. If married, you would provide the spouse's information and send them a contributor invitation. If you do not file married, filing jointly. It'll also ask you your state of residence and when you became a resident of the current state you reside. I believe this is going to be for state aid purposes. After parent demographics, it's going to go into parent financials. So this is going to ask for any federal programs that you may have received benefits from in 2022, like Social Security, SNAP, WIC, Medicaid, or etc. It's going to ask you to confirm your family size from the 2022 taxes, as well as the number of family members in college. Please note this does not include parents when it's asking for family members in college, just dependents. Then it will also ask for asset information like IRA, pension, child support, cash checking savings, business investments, and investment net worth. Again, values cannot be left blank. If it is 0, please make sure that you enter that on the FAFSA. It will not allow you to continue. It will pop up red if you do leave anything blank. After the parent financials, it comes to the parent signature page. So the signatures are very important as FAFSAs are not considered complete until all contributors fill in their sections and sign it. Once the students and contributors sign their FAFSAs, they are completed. And once completed, it will be submitted to the FAFSA processor, and then schools will probably get them maybe end of January, early February. That's when schools will be able to possibly receive the FAFSAs. But if you do have any questions throughout the process, we have some helpful links and resources for financial aid. So we have our website, hofstra.edu/SFS. On here, we have any updates that we're aware of with any type of FAFSA filing or federal aid processes. We also have links to our presentations like this one if you do need any additional information. For any federal aid or FAFSA questions, you can go to studentaid.gov, which is the direct link for the FAFSA. If you're a New York State resident and you're interested in any state aid, you can go to hesc.ny.gov. And for any general information, finaid.org is another great resource. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email us at sfs@hofstra.edu with 2024-2025 FAFSA in the subject line. That way we can assist you with any questions that you may have. Throughout the filing process, we do strongly encourage you to contact FAFSA directly, but we can definitely assist with some general inquiries or questions that you may have. So again, please feel free, sfs@hofstra.edu with 2024-2025 FAFSA in the subject line. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Again, this is a recorded webinar, so it will be posted to our website. Any questions you may have, please feel free to contact us. I will leave it up on the screen, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.